Welcome to another MyTrack training video. Item maintenance. Item maintenance is an area where you can maintain your inventory for every item in your system. Inventory is adjusted in multiple modules, in sales orders, work orders, invoicing, purchase orders, but the general maintenance of those inventory items are done in item maintenance. There's a tab in item maintenance called inventory. If you click on the inventory tab, you will see many attributes dealing with inventory. We have on the top row our standard, average, and last cost of the item. You also have some areas where you could input information. For example, the fixed price, minimum week safety stock, optimum build quantity. These items here are, for the most part, reference only. They are used in MRP reporting, things like that. You could also describe your reorder policy from exact quantity, lot, minimum, and associate your packaging information. Now the keys in item inventory is every item can have multiple inventory locations. So at the bottom grid you'll see we have one location. I could actually hit the adjust inventory, and right now we have no parts on hand, so I could actually hit this adjust inventory button and actually put 25 parts on hand. I could put a cost, I could set it a standard cost, I could actually type in a comment. Once I click save, that new inventory is added to that location, and you can see at the top our on-hand quantity went up also. Now why we have two different quantities is the top is an aggregate of the different location quantities. If I hit adjust inventory, I'm going to hit add location, I could actually add a new location for the inventory. So I could say container XYZ, a lot number, I can put a revision if there's a specific set of revision parts that belong to that location, and I can put in a quantity. I could put in an expiration date, a last transaction date, things like that. I could also set it as a default. Whenever a new item is created, a default location is created. All items have a location unless you mark the item as non-inventory. So when I hit save, we now have two locations. It's really the same location, but two designations, and one could be the designation, if I scroll the screen a little bit, a specific container or lot within that specific location. I have quantity of 25 and 10. My on-hand quantity is 35, so that is the aggregate. You could click on the transfer button to transfer inventory between locations, and you could edit these locations. You could also hit the print button to print the locations out in a report. Now, there are other areas in this yellow for inventory, and I will describe them now. Reserved inventory. This is the amount of inventory that's reserved for a particular order. If you have multiple persons entering orders at the same time, you could have 50 in inventory, but if one of those orders requires 40 of those pieces, you don't want the second order to come in and require 30 of those, because they would be requiring the same inventory. You actually need to manufacture some more, so you could reserve quantity, which would then be your available. Demand. Demand is when you create a sales order. If you create a sales order, there's demand for that product. So if I create a sales order that needs 100 parts, my demand would go up 100. If I then ship those parts through the invoicing module and packing slip module, that demand would go down as the demand on the order goes down. Ordered is simply the quantity of parts that are currently on order through the purchase order module. If you're not manufacturing this part, you could actually create a purchase order to buy these parts from another supplier. Then you have your maximum on hand, minimum order. Reorder point is critical because the reorder point is where you set mins and maxes. So you could have a report that whenever certain inventory quantities fall below the reorder, you could then create another purchase order for those. WIP, this is work in process. This is when you've issued those items, you've taken those items out of inventory, either raw material or finished goods, and applied them to a work or manufactured work order that is in progress, because the inventory depletes the on hand, but the work in process goes up. Once the invoice is created, or really the work order is completed, the WIP will go down for that item. And then you have pull. That's just a phrase we use to help purchasing to say, instead of purchasing this item, we're actually going to pull some of these off the shelf. It's just a little designation. So inventory works very easy. You could have multiple locations. When you have multiple locations, when you ship jobs, when you put jobs into inventory, parts into inventory, you will need to specify the location. By default, it will use a default location, but there are different rules you could use as items are put into inventory and removed. And lastly, we have our transactions. If I show all the transactions, these are inventory transactions, and you will actually see that these transactions occurred, and we have a comment, and we added a new location. So these are the two transactions that we created during this presentation. So you could see and review all the ins and outs of your inventory. So that is item maintenance inventory. Other modules, when we start talking about the sales order, work orders, and purchasing, we'll discuss the inventory a little more on how it really is affected by those different modules.